Dr. Ohenia Gold, and this is Science on the Street. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Melissa Scruggs, a volcanologist, to talk a little bit about how she got into volcanology and the activity we're seeing in Iceland. So, Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ohenia. I first became interested in volcanoes when I was an undergrad. I took an excellent class on the archaeology of ancient disasters. And in that class, we were watching a YouTube video, and there was the volcano scientist in the silver suit. And I thought it was just like the coolest, most amazing thing that I had ever seen. And I raised my hand and asked the professor, like, how do I do that? Like, that's so cool. Like, how do you get to do that? And they told me that I had to get a PhD in volcanology. So that's what I wanted to do, and I did.
That's amazing. And right now, you're a postdoc, is that right?
Right now, I just finished my PhD almost 2 years ago. I'm doing a postdoc. I also am a science outreach specialist for a local conservation district here in Vancouver, Washington, where I live, and hoping to one day be able to work at one of the volcano observatories.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on finishing your PhD. That's huge.
Thank you.
So Iceland right now
Yeah.
is seeing a lot of changes in their land, lots of earthquakes, like something like 1,400 earthquakes recorded in a 24-hour period, big cracks appearing through their cities. Um, as some of our viewers might know, Iceland is part of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is where two continents are moving apart from each other. And so lots of magma comes up and creates little volcanoes all the way down that Mid-Atlantic Ridge and sort of formed Iceland as the above the sea version of that. What does it mean when there are 1,400 earthquakes and big cracks appearing through their cities?
Well, that's a really great question. It means that there is likely a magma body underneath. Iceland is a little bit different than the rest of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge because it has a mantle plume at that intersecting with the ridge right there. So it has a little bit more active, well, not quite a little bit, it has quite a bit more volcanic activity than the rest of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is why it lies above the sea level. This is not unexpected. This situation where a volcano erupted in very close proximity to a city happened as recently as 1973 in Iceland on the southern coast on the island of Heimaey, which was just a little bit north of Surtsey. They did evacuate the town, except for some residents who stayed behind to fight the volcano and were able to stall the lava flow using seawater and divert it from filling in the harbor and therefore saving the livelihood of the town. So it's an amazing story, and I definitely think that if anywhere can handle this, it's Iceland for sure. The residents are very well equipped, very well prepared. The Met Office they know what they're doing, and there are a lot of great volcano scientists already in the country, as well as a lot of volcano scientists who have gone over in the past, week or so to bring instrumentation and help with all of the measurements and install new instrumentation to better monitor this magma body that's underneath Grindavik to make sure we can keep ahead of it to know what it's doing. It's in a really not great location. So the area where the dike is, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but on the vetter.is, they have the newest map that shows where the intrusion is. There's an area called the Sundakar craters, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing that. That zone of volcanoes, the crater line, it last erupted in, I want to say, like 352 BC-ish. It's not very old geologically speaking. And so when magma goes through the Earth's crust, just like anything else, if you've had a really hard day, you come home and you don't want to do a lot of work, right? So this magma's already done a lot of work. It's been, it's been generated in the mantle. It's had to move upwards through the oceanic crust, and it's already had to do a lot of work. So it's just going to want to find the path of least resistance, just like you and I at the end of a hard day. So that's why this magma body is where it is, because this is a pre-existing zone of weakness in the crust from about 2 or 3,000 years ago, where there was an eruption before. In fact, Grindavik is built on lavas from that last eruption of this craters. So that's why even if the magma body doesn't erupt right in the town could still be at risk from a lava flow.
So I am not a volcanologist, but I did take some petrology based courses as an undergrad, and I know that the chemistry of the magma can affect what kinds of eruptions we see. So the magma that, erupts in Hawaii, it can be different than what we see in Iceland and can be different from what we see in other volcanic eruptions. What can we predict about the eruption that we might see based on the chemistry of the magma?
Well, so the chemistry of the magma in Iceland is fairly similar to the kind of lavas that erupt in Hawaii. They're both basalt. I would say they're both usually, not always, usually eruptions in Iceland are not explosive. So everybody brings up the 2010 eruption of Eyjafjallajökull, which was very explosive, threw a big air plume into the atmosphere and it stalled air traffic. Well, that was helped because the second half of that eruption, a vent opened up underneath the glacier. And when magma and water interact, it's really just not a great situation, and things can get very, very, very explosive. Luckily, in this situation underneath Grindavik and the surrounding area, we don't have any glaciers, so I wouldn't worry about that. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that the eruption wouldn't be what we would consider explosive. Like, you certainly wouldn't want to go stand next to it, but this is not going to be anywhere. If there is an eruption, I would not expect it to be anywhere near the magnitude of Eyjafjallajökull, St. Helens, anything like that. That's not what we're talking about. We would be talking about some fire fountaining, some lava flows, the same type of activity that you would expect from a typical Hawaiian eruption, or really even the last 3 years of eruptive activity at Fagrastafjall. It would be that same type of activity. The only reason that things are really different right now is because that type of activity would be where people live and where a power station is and where one of the biggest tourist attraction in Iceland is. So there's quite a bit of potential for large impact to human populations and structures here.
You mentioned the eruption in 2010. That eruption in Iceland shut down air traffic across Europe for a couple of weeks. Why is it that planes can't fly through the ash clouds that are produced from these volcanic eruptions?
Oh, that's a great question. So an eruption plume is little bits of volcanic ash, and volcanic ash is glass. It's just like obsidian. It's just in teeny, 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 tiny microscopic fragments that you can't see. And even in a microscope, you can just see their shape. You can't even see their detail. And as I'm sure all of your viewers have seen glass blowers before, when you heat glass up, it melts. And that's what happens inside of a jet engine. So if the ash gets trapped inside of the jet engine, it heats back up, forms a liquid, and then it will kind of fuse onto the engine and freeze back up and reform, and then the engine won't be able to run anymore. So yeah, airplane engines and volcanic ash are another really good knot combination. So that's a reason why even when there's a volcano erupting somewhere else in the world, they might not be able to fly airplanes through a certain part of the airspace because volcanic ash can travel with the winds.
If this part of Iceland faces an eruption, will that unlock other areas in Iceland and cause eruptions in other places? Or can you predict if the volcanic activity will be kind of localized?
That's a really good question. You can't really say that the eruptions at Fagrastafjord the last 3 years triggered this eruption. Along the same lines, you couldn't say that this eruption will trigger another eruption in a different place. The probability of one eruption triggering another is very, 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 very small, and really doesn't even happen at volcanoes that are right next to each other, like Kilauea and Mauna Loa. Maybe once in the past like 150 years has that kind of happened there. So that's not what I would expect to see here, especially where there's a totally different tectonic setting than in Hawaii. So this eruption or this magma body coming in, really, because it's not an eruption yet. It could be. It also could totally not be. But if there were to be an eruption here, it wouldn't be triggered by anything else. It's just a function of the plates are being pulled apart, and you can't really have a void just hanging out in the middle of the earth. You can't have a void. Magma is going to come up and rise up to fill that space that's being made by the plates being pulled apart. So wherever like the cracks in the crust form, that's where magma comes up, which is why if you look at that map of the Reykjavik Peninsula in Iceland, all the fissures seem to go in like kind of the same direction because they're all formed by the cracks, by cracks from the plates being pulled apart, and then they get pushed to either side.
That's really interesting because with earthquakes, you can see this sort of triggering effect where one earthquake in one spot will unlock the fault along the fault line and trigger earthquakes down the line. But it's really interesting that that doesn't happen with volcanic eruptions.
It depends on the volcano. It does depend on the
Sure.
volcano. I wouldn't say that about all volcanoes, that doesn't operate at all volcanoes, but for Iceland, and especially this type of activity where it's really related just to the plates being pulled apart, yeah, we don't have any type of that interaction here.
Is there a chance that the pull apart will stop just shy of magma actually reaching the surface? Can we see a bunch of activity, a bunch of cracks forming, and then nothing sort of happen on the surface?
Well, I think that is what we're seeing right now. That really is. On November 10th, when all of this kind of really ramped up, because all of this earthquake activity started back on October 25th. And you had some you had some earthquake activity, which when magma moves through the surface, if it's breaking rock, it will generate earthquakes. That's what these earthquakes are. And that's also why if your viewers look on Twitter, there have been some crazy videos. And as a volcano scientist, I'm just like, oh, when you can hear the earthquake, but you don't see it. Like that to me is so scary, but that's what that was that's the magma body coming in from underground. And so think about it like this: as a magma is coming in underground, it's pushing apart the ground where it's at, which is going to push apart the ground up above. And so the ground on the western side of Grindavik and where the magma body is located underground sank over like almost 4 feet overnight, which is why you had these really big cracks and all of the road damage and the damage in the houses and everything. 4 feet in a night is nothing to sniff at. That's a lot of displacement. And then since then, it's been continuing to sink about 5 centimeters a day. So about 2 inches a day additional subsidence, like the ground's going down because the magma is still there. And it could be that the magma is moving upwards. It also could be that the magma is just really shallow and hanging out. We don't know. I can tell you that the latest developments were that sulfur dioxide gas was measured at one of the boreholes at the Svargetsi power plant. The borehole is a hole for your viewers. It's a hole in the ground that's already been drilled so that they can actually measure these gas ratios, because when the ratios of volcanic gases change, that can tell you something about what the magma is doing, whether it's moving, how close to the surface it is, and stuff like that. So with sulfur dioxide, you really only see elevated levels of it when it's within the upper half a kilometer, or like half a kilometer of from the surface. So a little under a half a mile below the surface for American viewers. That's pretty shallow. That's a lot. I mean, I'm sure that that's probably a lot closer than any of us would be comfortable with having a magma body underneath our house, so unfortunately, just having those levels of sulfur dioxide doesn't tell us that it is moving upwards. It just tells us that, yes, there is a magma there. It doesn't tell us whether or not it will erupt, and it doesn't give us any sort of inkling as to timing. Now, there have been additional geophysical surveys done. So some types of volcano scientists that measure ground deformation, they can use the GPS placements and how they move to calculate like the magma body and where it is and its volume. That's how we know all of this. There's like 70 million cubic meters of magma in this intrusion, which is a lot. That's a lot. But the good news is that the seismic activity is decreasing. It's kind of steady, but it's gone down. It's not like going totally down, but it's kind of plateaued at about like 800 or 900 earthquakes a day, like you were saying in your intro. The ground deformation is still happening, but it's slowed. And as a volcano scientist, that tells me that the magma is probably just like sitting there. It's probably not really moving upwards. That doesn't mean that it can't, right? I never say never. I never say never. But because things are kind of slowing down, I feel like I would like to hope that it won't erupt. There's still a high probability of it. There is still a high probability of it, which is, I'm looking on the Icelandic Met Office website. It says, warning, there is still a high probability of a volcanic eruption. Keyword still. Because it can take up to 2 or 3 weeks for these magma bodies to kind of cool and settle out and figure out what they're doing. Right now, some of these seismic surveys have showed that this magma body is starting to cool around the edges, which is good, in that when a magma body cools and it's crystalline, it's too viscous to erupt. It can't move. It's just too stiff. But when a magma body cools, that also means that it can grow gas bubbles inside of it. And those gas bubbles increase the pressure inside the magma body, and that can cause an eruption. So right now, we're kind of playing the waiting game. We're waiting to see what the magma body will do, because it's really close, but not quite there.
It's amazing how far the study of volcanoes has come in the last, even since Mount St. Helens, even since then, the instrumentation and the amount of predictive power we have and the amount of being able to understand what's happening underground without being able to see
is amazing.
It's incredible. So it's really great that we have all these predictive tools and that we can warn towns and evacuate with so much time before things really get serious.
Yeah, I'm really glad that the Icelandic officials did evacuate. I don't doubt at all, even if this eruption doesn't happen, it was absolutely the right call. 100% the right call.
What are you looking forward to in terms of the future of volcano science in general?
Well, for me, I study the chemistry of magmas and the minerals inside of them. I'm most interested in understanding that switch, that eruption triggering mechanism. Like, what is the one thing that made a volcano erupt? Out of all of the different things that are happening, what's the thing that sets it over the edge? Right. So for me, this is very interesting because I get to see a magma body come in and hang out and be right on the edge, which I'm very excited to see if it does erupt, and then to see if we can figure out what the eruption trigger was. Uh, One of the coolest things that we've been able to do in the past like 5 or 10 years is to measure the chemistry of a crystal that grows in a magma and measure its chemistry like across the crystal and figure out how long it took to grow that crystal. And from that, like between how long it took to grow and the chemistry of the crystal, figure out what's going on inside of the magma chamber and how long it takes. So that I think to me is the most exciting thing right now that we can do. One day I really hope that we'll have the technology to be able to actually like see inside of a magma reservoir, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen within our lifetimes, but I hope and wish that it would.
Melissa, this has been amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing how the situation in Iceland progresses, and the information you gave us was so great. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been really nice. I really appreciate the opportunity to share good, valid scientific information and what's been going on with your viewers.
We'll see you next time on Science on the Street.